Do you know you can hire the most skilled person in the world, but if they are not a good cultural fit, they won't last. I'm Karen Coleman. Welcome to From HR to Impact. Today, we're going to talk about finding the right candidate for the culture fit and why it's important, not only for your organization, but your culture and your brand. I've seen both sides of this where organizations they look at a resume and see the most phenomenal skilled person on paper, but then when they interview them and they hire them, they're not a good cultural fit. And the organization go haywire because the individual wasn't aligned. And guess what that did? That brings down your culture of all your employees. So why does that matter? Why does culture fit matters? First, what is culture? So culture is, let's say, the personality of your organization, the way it behaves, the way it acts, not only in your leaders, but your employees as well. It reminds me of an organization going through an investigation. One of the things that an attorney may ask is, let me see your handbook, or let me see your or let me see your policy, excuse me. And the organization may say, well, our policy says this, but we really do this. Well, guess what? That just became your practice. That became your behavior. That became the personality of the organization. Even though it's not legal, because legally you should be following your handbook, you should be following your policies. But attorneys and legal authorities could use your practice against you because you're not following a well written policy. A lot of people are like, and I've worked with CEOs that say this: culture, huh, that's just a bunch of fluff. No one has time for this fluff. We all about doing what's right and we have to grow the organization. But let's talk about something you do care about. Let's talk about money. How much money it costs for you to take one of your HR representative, your talent acquisition person. They have to research, they have to post jobs, they have to find the candidate, you have to interview the candidate, you have to bring the candidate in, then you go through the interview process, then you hire them, you give them a first paycheck. They were not a cultural fit, so guess what? They don't last. So do you care about the time that it spends to hire a person? So why not do it right? The US Department of Labor says that it estimates a bad hire is 30% of the person's first annual salary. Can you imagine that? 30%. Oh my goodness. Let me give you an example of a personal story. I joined an organization and it was suffering from turnover. I mean, let me tell y'all, turnover was over 50%. Why? They hired the wrong leader. This was a leader they hired. He was aggressive, he was blunt, he had team members fighting against each other. I mean, it was a nightmare. And I told the CEO, do not hire this person. He is not a good fit. He's not a good culture fit. Well, let's fast forward. Now, before I do that, let me be clear. On paper, he was phenomenal. He used to always walk around and say, I'm in charge. I'm the boss. You do what I said. Well, guess what? He lasted 2 years because he wasn't a good culture fit. You want to know the sad part about that? He was on the executive team. He was one that had to lead the organization. Now, 2 years later, he was no longer with the organization, but they had to revamp a lot of the positions that they hired because guess what he did? He was a hiring manager, so he hired people who exhibited the same behavior as he did. And the organization, I have to tell you, it was the one of the most best cultures I've ever been in at that point. I mean, it was really good. So to hire this person whose behavior and personality was totally opposite from the organization, well, guess what? it cost that organization not only a lot of money because of the money they spent on hiring him, but to replace everyone he brought in. And then they had to regain trust with employees. They had to get people, the right people in the right seats. They had to, again, rebrand themselves because of that costly mistake of hiring someone on skill alone. Culture is so important. So the question becomes, how do we avoid these costly mistakes? It starts with asking the right questions to the candidates in the interview process. So it's very important that you evaluate the candidate in the interview process and interview them beyond the resume, beyond the skills that can be taught. Because again, as I mentioned, skills can be taught, but culture alignment, that's a little harder to fix. So in the interview, what you want to do is ask questions that's beyond the resume. I mean, when you look at the resume, you're looking at the skills, and as I mentioned in my example, you know what they're capable of doing. So, in the resume or in the interview, what you want to do is see that what's on that resume they actually did. And not only they actually did, they were successful in it. And then, how can they take those skills and that knowledge and bring it to your organization? So we'll talk about that in another series, but the question becomes, how do I interview for culture fit? That's the key question. And let's be real, you are not going to find out everything about anyone in an interview. Anyone who is interviewing, they're going to be on their best behavior. You're going to see an angel sitting in front of you. They do no wrong. They're perfect. Everyone's perfect that's sitting in that seat. Because if you did your due diligence, you've already went through the resume, you already did the screening, so you know they have some base. They basically qualify for the job. But in the interview now, you have to find out beyond the skills that you've already established, and you are asking questions with that. But can they play well in can they play well in the playground with others? That's the question. And how do you do that? First, of course, once you prepare your interview questions, you want to ask those situational questions. You want to ask those core value questions. You want to ask those behavior based questions of, tell me a time when you disagreed with a team member. What did you do about that? What was the end result? Or what type of work environment do you do your best work? What do you perform best in? What kind of leader do you work best for? What kind of leader do you not work best for? Just something that could really get them talking about how they respond to certain things or how they have responded in certain situations. And you got to read between the lines because, again, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. Some people take classes on how to interview. So I am going to tell you anything you want to hear. Keep your feelings and emotions out of the interview. Stick to the position itself. Can they do the job? Can they play well in the playground with others? I'll give you an example. So I was working for this organization, great culture, by the way, phenomenal culture. I think I've had some really good luck with cultures, and I've had some bad ones, but I was interviewing for a quality manager. And at this point, it was a corporate quality manager, which means that they would not report to the CEO, but have some interaction. So the CEO wanted to interview the quality manager, which is great, right? So I interviewed the person first. I asked my situational questions. I asked my behavioral questions. I asked my value based question, but something wasn't right. They were finicky. They wouldn't look me in the eye. I look away when I think, and you'll see that. But they were looking like all over. They just wouldn't look at me, which wasn't 100%. Oh my goodness, something is wrong. But the answers in the interview questions is what gave me an idea that something's not right. You're a quality manager. You have to be detail oriented. You have to make sure that before our product go out to the public, you've done your due diligence. You have to be customer friendly and quality friendly. Well, this person, when I asked some questions, they gave me answers. That was a little suspect. that they wouldn't handle situations very well. And when I asked those type of questions, the more nervous they got. So remember, you have to read between the lines. I didn't have a good feeling about this. Something wasn't right. And one of the interview questions, they end up telling me a situation where they didn't do the right thing. And not only did they do the right thing, it was almost borderline illegal. So anyhow, I went to CEO, and after the interview, and the CEO has an interview and the team interview, and I said, do not hire this person. CEO desperate for a person. We need a person in the seat. It's been open. I have to replace. I said, you do not want to hire this person. You want the right person in the right seat. This person is not going to stay. Not only do I think that they didn't do what's on that resume, but I don't think they're a good culture fit. CEO told me to hire them anyway. Through our onboarding, part of your onboarding, you get to go to our headquarters. Now, we were the corporate office in the US, but there was a headquarters overseas. And especially managers and above, we would fly you out overseas, which you can imagine the cost of that. The person is getting ready to go overseas. I get a phone call, and we have fired the person. We're sending him back, and we need you to finish the rest of the process. He didn't show up on time. A few times he showed up drunk. He had no idea what we were talking about when we were talking about quality manuals. He had no clue about any of these things. And so we have fired him and we're sending him back. So I went to CEO, let him know what was going on. This was a huge cost. I mean, he wasn't even there a week. And not only did we do all the right things, we flew him overseas. Can you imagine how costly that was just to fly him back and terminate him? Costly, costly, costly. And what that shows us is you can still ask the right questions, but you need a strong hiring process and a true cultural alignment before you bring someone on board, and don't make it an afterthought. The hiring process should involve multiple stakeholders. Remember, HR do not determine your culture. They are not the end all. It is not just HR views. It's all the team function views. Everyone plays a part in this. So grab stakeholders from different departments to be a part of this interview process. And if I don't say this enough, listen to me. Please, 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 please don't have 4 and 5 interviews. And what I mean by that, don't have you do a screen, you look at the resume, you do a screening on the phone, then you bring the person in, then you bring the person in again, and you bring the person in again, and you bring the person in again. Please stop that. If you're really looking for top talent, someone's going to grab them. They're not going to wait for 5 interviews. And what that shows about your culture is you don't know what you want. You're indecisive. You don't know the type of person you're looking for. That, guess what? That's your personality of the organization. That's your culture. Why would I want to work for someone who don't know what they want? How can they lead an organization if they don't even know what they want? I've been in that process where I remember one organization brought me back 4 times, 4 times. Now, the first two, I was like, okay. The third one, I was like, I don't like this. But by the fourth one, I accepted a position with another organization who was decisive. They knew what they wanted. They knew where they were going. They gave me an opportunity to interview them as well, part of the 2 interviews that I had. And I'm okay with the first one, the screening, and then the first one and the second one. But when you go beyond that, why? If you are not ready to interview the person, if your team is not ready and you have to try to grab everyone because they're so busy, don't interview. You're not ready. You're sending the wrong message. Don't interview. Culture is from the rec to the desk. It is your opportunity to show that we don't have it all together, but together we don't have it all together. But we're in this. We have integrity. We have character. We're going to always try to do the right thing, and we're going to respect you, and we're going to respect your time. That's what culture looks like. And onboarding starts that culture. I mean, from the rec to the desk, but that onboarding really also start that culture. That starts your culture journey. And I remember when I started with an organization, one of my, uh, I was going to say one of my best ones, my favorite ones was in Nashville. And when I started with the company before day one, I interviewed, wasn't long, but I interviewed. I got home. They made me the offer maybe a couple of weeks later before my start. It was a week before I was supposed to start. I get flowers with a coat, with a card from the CEO welcoming me to the team. That made me feel so special, I have to tell you. Then I started day one. My boss met me at the door, walked me to my office. I walk in my office. It's filled with all this branded apparel, a t-shirt. There was a mug on the desk. There was a notepad, a branded notepad, another welcome card. The team took me to lunch. It was just a really, really good feeling. And I remember that feeling. So I wanted to, going forward, anyone that joined the organization that I hired for, I wanted them to have that same feeling. So I started to do welcome gifts and swag and recognition gifts and all the things so they could have that same positive experience. So I remember that journey, and I remember that just being such a great culture. But hiring is more than just looking at something on a resume or filling a seat. It's about building a future. It's about impacting engagement, retention, and brand reputation. So I have to tell you one of my proudest onboarding moments. I was interviewing for a production manager for a startup facility. The organization wasn't a new startup, but they would start a new facility, highly automation, and they needed a top notch production manager. So I interviewed this person who wife had convinced them to interview because they wasn't going to. I mean, they were good. They had all the experience, all the knowledge. They looked at you. They were direct. They told you what they did. They told you their experiences. They were a good culture fit for my interview question. Just great. And it's interesting because one thing that concerned me was the company that they were potentially leaving. They were there for 22 years. So turn a positive to a negative, in which I did, and I shouldn't have, but I did. Um, I was nervous that after 22 years of that loyalty, they would not want to come to my organization or the organization I worked at. Well, fast forward, we hired them. They did come. They stayed 20 years with us. 20 years. Talk about commitment and loyalty. My gut told me this was a great fit, and it was a phenomenal fit to the point he retired from there. So it just shows you that it is possible to combine and align the skills and the expertise with the culture to get that perfect candidate. I say perfect, nothing's perfect, but a great candidate. It works. So, conclusion, what is the takeaway from this? If you want people to stay, you want people to thrive, and you want to represent your brand, start by understanding your culture and hiring for that alignment. Again, yes, skills, knowledge, experience, yes, we're going to hire for that. But make sure that culture alignment is also in that interview process. So I want to ask you all the questions, and please add it to the comment section. What's one culture lesson that you've learned in the hiring process? And if you were the candidate, what is something you remembered in a hiring process that said, this is a company I want to work for? I am looking forward to reading your comments. This is just a part of a series of hiring practices, talent acquisitions. Next, we will talk about the interview process, one of my favorite things, and how not to have too many interviews to drive away a great candidate. If you have not done so, subscribe to this channel. We're going to talk about all things HR and especially how to go from HR to impact. Until then, have a great week.